welcome back to the Striha Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Parker Striha, and on today's episode, we are going to be doing part one of a two-part series covering all of the moves that happened during the first week of NFL free agency. I'm by no means professional, but I do love talking about sports, so thank you for joining me. Now, I just want to say that I would have covered all of these moves last week, but I was actually in Las Vegas for my spring break. With that said, I'm going to do my best to recap all of the moves that happened last week. I'm going to focus more on the bigger transactions, but I will make mention of smaller moves. I am also going to be talking about each team and their moves individually, which will be separated by division. This is going to be a very long episode, but I hope it won't go too long. So go ahead, grab yourself a snack, and let's get going with the NFC North. Starting off with the Chicago Bears, they released running back Tariq Cohen. They released defensive tackle Eddie Goldman, and the Eddie Goldman move cleared up almost $7 million for them. And the biggest move that they made this offseason so far was trading outside linebacker Khalil Mack to the Los Angeles Chargers for a 2022 second-round pick and a 2023 sixth-round pick. Now, I would have made a video dedicated to this move, but there was also way too many moves that happened last week, so I figured I'd just throw it in here, talk about it. I can't believe they did this. I can't believe the Chargers got him for basically nothing when they're a team that can easily contend this year, and even easier now with a guy like Khalil Mack. I don't know what the Bears are doing. It seems like they want to compete, but they also are making an effort to suck when they make a move like trading Khalil Mack for nothing, pretty much. I know the second-round pick could be really good, but you're trading one of the best edge rushers in the league when he's healthy for a second and a sixth. When you traded, I think, 2 or 3 first-round picks plus however many other things to get him, it's just a stupid move for Khalil Mack, or not for Khalil Mack, for the Bears. And for the Chargers, I'll talk more about it for them once I get to the AFC episode. The Bears also released Danny Trevathan and cleared up almost $7 million. They signed Equinemius St. Brown, a wide receiver, for a 1 year with the money unknown. They signed Byron Pringle, another wide receiver, to a 1 year, $6 million deal with $4 million guaranteed. They signed outside linebacker Nicholas Morrow to a 1 year, $3 million deal with $2.5 million guaranteed. They signed defensive tackle Justin Jones to a 2 year, $12 million contract with guarantees still unknown. And they signed center Lucas Patrick to a 2 year, $8 million deal with $4 million guaranteed. Now, they were going to sign defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi to a 3 year, $40.5 million contract with just over $26 million guaranteed, but they are not going to sign him anymore due to a failed physical. Now, moving on to the Minnesota Vikings, they signed quarterback Kirk Cousins to a fully guaranteed 1 year, $35 million extension. That's a really big move for the Vikings. They are committing to Kirk Cousins as their quarterback for at least one more year, and then I think they'll end up moving on. I can't say for sure. Kirk Cousins has been solid for them. He has by no means been the best quarterback in the league or even a top 5, but I think right now he's the best that the Vikings can do. And I know there's a lot of hate for Kirk Cousins because he can't win primetime games or this or that. I don't mind Kirk Cousins. I think he's a good quarterback, but I think his time in Minnesota is slowly winding down. They signed defensive tackle Harrison Phillips to a 3 year, $19.5 million deal with $12.9 million guaranteed. They signed inside linebacker Jordan Hicks to a 2 year, $10 million deal with $6.5 million guaranteed. They released defensive tackle Michael Pierce, which cleared up $6.5 million. They also converted $8 million of Harrison Smith's roster bonus into a signing bonus, which saved them $6 million. And just before I started recording this episode, they signed outside linebacker Zadarius Smith to a 3 year, $42 million deal with guarantees that are still unknown. That is actually a really big signing for the Vikings, whether people want to admit it or not. He was a really solid edge rusher for the Green Bay Packers when he was healthy. I don't really think he did a lot in Baltimore because he he really evolved into a better player when he was in Green Bay and was a key part of that Green Bay defense over the last 2 or 3 years. And that's a huge loss for Green Bay, and it's a huge gain for Minnesota, in my opinion. They don't run the same scheme that Green Bay had, so Zadarius Smith will most likely have his hand in the dirt almost every down because I don't really think he's going to be dropping into coverage. But they can play him opposite of Danielle Hunter, or they can probably play him at a defensive tackle spot on some plays. But I'd prefer to see him on the edge if I am a Vikings fan. But like I said, that is a huge signing for them. It gives them a dependable, solid edge rusher on the opposite side of Danielle Hunter. So they will have, in my opinion, one of the top edge rushing duos this year if both of them can stay healthy. Injuries have been a problem for those two over the last couple of years, so it'll be interesting to see how that turns out. The Detroit Lions signed Alex Anzalone to a 1-year, $2.5 million extension. They signed safety Tracy Walker to a 3-year, $25 million extension with just under $17 million guaranteed. They signed wide receiver DJ Chark to a fully guaranteed 1-year, $10 million deal. I really like that for them. I don't know if it's an overpay. I don't know if Chark has done enough to warrant getting $10+ million a year, but he's definitely a solid wide receiver. I wanted Green Bay to draft him when he came out of college because he is, I believe, 6'4" with legitimate 4.3, 4.4 speed, which is unbelievable. There's not a lot of receivers that big that can run that fast. He hasn't been great in Jacksonville, but Jacksonville also has had really, really bad quarterback play for as long as I can remember. So it'll be interesting to see how he plays with Jared Goff or whoever Detroit's quarterback is going to be if they do sign someone else or draft someone in this year's draft. They also signed defensive end Charles Harris to a 2-year, $13 million extension, which had $7 million guaranteed. And they also released defensive end Trey Flowers, which saved $10.386 million against the cap. Moving on to the Green Bay Packers, they converted $7.215 million of Kenny Clark's 2022 salary and a $6.4 million roster bonus into a signing bonus, which cleared $10.892 million. Massive deal for them. They need to clear up as much money as they can in doing that. And converting those numerical values into a signing bonus did just that for them. Aaron Jones, they converted his $3.75 million roster bonus and $100,000 of his base salary into a signing bonus and added 2 void years to his contract, which cleared $3.08 million. David Bakhtiari, their left tackle, they converted $2.08 million of his 2022 base salary and $9.5 million of a roster bonus into a signing bonus, which cleared $7.6 million more for them. There was a video dedicated to this, and I didn't really want to mention it, but I figured it's big news for Green Bay Packers fans and the NFC North in general. They signed quarterback Aaron Rodgers to a 3-year, $150.815 million restructured contract extension, which is fully guaranteed. Not going to talk about it a lot because I did have a whole video on that earlier. They signed outside linebacker Preston Smith to a 4-year, $52 million restructured contract extension with only $12.2 million guaranteed. I think that's a really good move for Green Bay. They lowered Preston Smith's cap hit for this year, and with that low of number for guaranteed money, they can really afford to cut him after this year and really face no penalty. He's going to be a solid edge rusher on the other side of Rashawn Gary. And for a team that lost Zadarius Smith, I think they really hope that Preston Smith is going to play like he did a couple years ago and be a top edge rusher in the league. Green Bay also released guard Billy Turner, which cleared $4.2 million. They signed Rasul Douglas to a 3-year, $21 million extension with the guarantees unknown in that. Was one of the highlights of Green Bay's season. They signed him for pretty much nothing, and then he was one of the best corners in the league for the rest of the year. They signed Robert Tonyan Jr. to a 1-year contract. I saw that coming. I didn't think he was going to go anywhere because he's hurt, and he's not exactly one of the top tight ends in the league, but Aaron Rodgers trusts him. And if you're going to commit to Aaron Rodgers for the next however many years, keeping a guy that he trusts and can depend upon is a really smart move for Green Bay. They signed Pat O'Donnell to a 1-year, $1.625 million contract. Wide receiver Randall Cobb decided to take a $5.5 million pay cut to take his salary down from $8.5 million to only $3 million. Just another move by Green Bay and their players to try to bring them closer to the allowed cap. They signed linebacker Devondre Campbell to a 5-year, $50 million extension with only $15 million guaranteed. Like Rasul Douglas, they signed him for pretty much nothing, and then he came out, balled out, was a first-team All-Pro linebacker this year, which no one saw coming. And I think it was smart. They're only paying him $10 million a year if you look at the contract, which for an all-pro linebacker is really, really good for them. And like with Preston Smith's contract, the guaranteed number is really low, so they can afford to cut him in the future with taking very little penalty, which is really huge for Green Bay. They signed wide receiver Allen Lazard to a 1-year, $3.986 million tender, which was a second-round tender, which pretty much just means that if any team offers Allen Lazard a contract, Green Bay can either match that contract or they can let Allen Lazard sign to that other team in exchange for that team's second-round pick. They converted $5.8 million of Adrian Amos's 2022 salary into a signing bonus and added 4 void years to his contract, which cleared $4.704 million. They released outside linebacker Zadarius Smith, which cleared $15.281 million. Talked about him a little bit with the Minnesota spot. Huge loss for Green Bay. He was one of the best edge rushers in the league when he was healthy, in my opinion. He was a key part of that Green Bay defense, and he's leaving a massive hole behind that they hope Kenny Clark and Preston Smith can fill. But the biggest news coming out of Green Bay is they traded Davante Adams to the Las Vegas Raiders for a 2022 first and second round pick in a move I did not see coming at all. And as a Green Bay Packer fan, this move kind of made me depressed, not going to lie. Did not expect to wake up from my nap in my Vegas hotel to see that he had been traded. And I mean, I'm not so much surprised that he got traded because he said he wasn't going to play under the franchise tag, but I'm more so surprised that Green Bay only got a first and second round pick for him. I know wide receivers don't exactly go for as much as quarterbacks do, and when you look at other star receiver trades like Amari Cooper, which I'll talk about later, and like DeAndre Hopkins a couple years ago, Green Bay actually got a lot more value than those other teams did in those trades, but I still think they could have gotten more. Davante Adams is arguably the best receiver in the league, and in my opinion, he is the best receiver in the league. So getting rid of him leaves a massive hole for the Green Bay Packers in that wide receiving core. As a Green Bay fan, I wouldn't mind them going out because I've heard talks about the Seahawks potentially trading a guy like Tyler Lockett or even DK Metcalf. And if I'm Green Bay and I have the assets now, I at least call Seattle for one of those two guys, if not both of them. Obviously, you're not going to trade for both of them, but at least see what it would take to get both of them, because I think both of them would be really, really good receivers with Aaron Rodgers. And another guy I would like to see them go out and try to get, which is extremely unlikely, is Keenan Allen from the Los Angeles Chargers. It's extremely unlikely, and I don't see any chance it happens. But if Green Bay has the assets to make it happen, I say call Los Angeles, at least see what it would take to bring in a guy like Keenan Allen, because you'd be replacing one of the best route runners in the league with arguably the second best route runner in the league. I mean, he'd fill right into Davante Adams' spot. He's more of a slot guy than an outside guy like Davante Adams was, but the production he's had in Los Angeles for the last however many years, I think would only increase in Green Bay with a guy like Aaron Rodgers. Moving on to the NFC East, we're going to start with the Dallas Cowboys. They signed defensive end Dante Fowler to a one-year deal. Wide receiver James Washington, they signed to a one-year deal. They re-signed linebacker Leighton Vander Esch to a one-year, $3 million deal. Shockingly, they released right tackle La'el Collins, which cleared up $10 million. I definitely did not see this coming, but I'm not super shocked. They need to make up money, and if releasing him cleared as much money as it did, I think it was kind of a no-brainer move, although it does leave a massive hole at right tackle for them. They released tight end Blake Jarwin, which cleared just under $4 million. They re-signed Michael Gallup to a 5-year, $57.5 million deal with only $27 million guaranteed. With them trading Amari Cooper, which I will talk about in a little bit, they needed to make it a priority to bring back Michael Gallup, and they did just that. He's getting just over $11 million a year, which I think is reasonable for a guy like Michael Gallup. However, he is coming off of an ACL tear, so it'll be interesting to see how much he actually plays in the first year of this contract. I think he'll be back and healthy for the start of the season, but with an injury like that, you don't want to rush it, and you just have to be very careful. They signed defensive end DeMarcus Lawrence to a 3-year, $40 million extension with $30 million guaranteed. I didn't exactly know what was going to happen with DeMarcus Lawrence. I heard they asked him to take a pay cut, which he did not want to do. So I thought he was either going to be traded or cut, and obviously that's not the case. They signed him to an extension, which I believe lowered his cap hit to help the team. And I mean, he's a solid edge rusher. I don't think he's worth the money he was getting paid on that first contract he got from Dallas, but I think it's a really good move for the Cowboys, and it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for them. They signed safety Malik Hooker to a 2-year, $7 million extension. They franchise tagged tight end Dalton Schultz for 1 year, $10.931 million fully guaranteed. They signed safety Jaron Kearse to a 2-year, $10 million deal. And then the big move was trading Amari Cooper and a 2022 6th-round pick to the Browns for a 5th and a 6th-round pick in 2022. I understand that they needed to get rid of his contract, but what are you doing? He's obviously not a top 5 receiver in the league, but he's easily a top 15, top 20 receiver in the league. And all you got back for him was ultimately a 5th, because I'm just going to say those 6th-round picks cancel out. So you basically got a 5th-round pick for a wide receiver in Amari Cooper. Awful. I did not like this trade for Dallas whatsoever. I thought it was kind of stupid for him. Made no sense. I think they could have gotten a lot more for him. Granted, his contract is a lot bigger than his play has warranted, but still, you're really only getting a 5th-round pick for him, and that 5th-round pick really isn't, I mean, it's very unlikely that pick, whoever they take with that pick, is going to produce for them and is even going to be a contributor this year. So I just did not like that move whatsoever. The Philadelphia Eagles signed center Jason Kelce to a 1-year, $9 million restructured contract, which is fully guaranteed, so he is now back in Philadelphia amid rumors that he was going to retire. They signed outside linebacker Hassan Reddick to a 3-year, $45 million deal with $30 million guaranteed. Now, this is a move I did not see coming at all. I was honestly kind of shocked that they went out and signed a guy like Reddick for $15 million a year, but I'm not upset that they did. They need a guy that can fill in for Brandon Graham, who is either going to be cut or probably retire sooner than later. I believe they're getting rid of Derek Barnett, or they didn't. I don't know if he has 1 year left or not, but like Derek Barnett, I don't think they're going to re-sign. And they have a guy like Josh Sweat, who's an athletic freak on the other end. Hassan Reddick has been really solid for the last couple of years with Carolina and Arizona. So I think this is a really good signing for the Eagles, who now have a pretty good front four that can rush the passer and cause havoc with offensive lines in their division, with really no offensive line in that division being great, especially at both tackle spots. They signed GM Howie Roseman to a 3-year extension. In a shocking move, they also released Fletcher Cox, which only cleared $2.12 million. but then they signed him back to a 1-year, $14 million deal. Not really sure what they were doing. I think they kind of just shot themselves in the foot. They're paying him more money, and the dead cap from releasing him I'm sure was massive, so I don't really understand what that was all about. They signed Anthony Harris to a 1-year deal, and they converted $14.88 million of Darius Slay's 2022 salary into a signing bonus and added a void year, which cleared $11.904 million. They also signed wide receiver Zach Pascal to a 1-year deal with not a lot of details known. The New York Giants signed guard Mark Glowinski to a 3-year, $18.3 million deal. They also signed guard John Feliciano to a 1-year, $3.25 million deal. Those may not seem like huge moves by the Giants, but I think they actually are really, really big. Those are two solid guards that can come in and instantly be starters and can instantly be two of the best linemen on your team. And if this is a make or break year for Daniel Jones, you need to give him as much protection and as much time as you can to see if he can be that guy. However, I don't really think he is. They released cornerback Logan Ryan. Wasn't really a surprising move. And then they signed quarterback Tyrod Taylor to a 2-year, $11 million deal. Now this, I think, is a huge move for them, and this hopefully will light a fire underneath Daniel Jones's rear end. This is a quarterback that if Jones is playing horrible, Tyrod Taylor can go in and can be the starter for them and can put up numbers. He has been on a couple different teams the last however many years. He was the quarterback when Baker Mayfield took over for the Browns, Justin Herbert took over for the Chargers, and then Davis Mills took over for the Texans. But Tyrod Taylor is, I think, one of the most underrated quarterbacks in the league. He's not a great quarterback. He's not a top quarterback in the league. But if I'm Daniel Jones, I'm worried about Tyrod Taylor taking my spot, so I need to play as close to perfect as possible. Otherwise, my job is gone. The Washington Commanders signed J.D. McKissick to a 2-year, $7 million extension. And he actually agreed to that same deal with Buffalo, but then decided to come back to the Commanders, which is promising for them because if I'm any player in the league, you'd think would be picking Buffalo over Washington, but McKissick decided to come back to Washington. They signed corner Bobby McCain to a 2-year, $10 million extension. They released safety Landon Collins, and that cleared $12 million. They released Matt Ioannidis, which cleared $6.8 million. They released Eric Flowers, which cleared another $10 million. And then they signed guard Andrew Norwell with the details of that contract currently unknown. But he is one of the best not one of the best guards in the league, but he is a really solid guard, and he is now reuniting with Ron Rivera from their time in Carolina. I'm only mentioning this next move because it's Troy Apke, cornerback, White Lightning, the only white cornerback in the league. I just thought it was kind of worth mentioning because he's still sticking around on a 1-year, $1.18 million extension. I mean, that's really all there is to it. He's not a great player, but I just thought it was worth noting that the only white corner in the league is sticking around. They then traded for Carson Wentz, a 2022 second-round pick, and a 2022 seventh-round pick from the Colts. They traded for those picks and Carson Wentz for a 2022 second-round pick, a 2022 third-round pick, and a conditional 2023 third-round pick, which can turn into a second-round pick in 2023 if Wentz plays a designated amount of snaps or they make the playoffs, I think. Huge move for the Commanders. Wentz is now back in the NFC East, which is going to be a really, really interesting. I don't know how that's going to pan out because I don't think Philly fans really like him anymore, and now he's going to be playing them twice a year. But if I'm the Commanders, I love this move. Wentz may not be the best quarterback in the league, especially over the last couple of years, but he is the best quarterback that Washington's had since RG3's rookie year, second year in the league maybe. So this is huge for them. They have a quarterback that can take them to the playoffs, And for a team that was considered a quarterback away, that's huge. Moving on to the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed cornerback Logan Ryan. They converted $12.88 million of Mike Evans' 2022 salary into a signing bonus, which cleared $10.3 million. They converted $14.88 million of Shaq Barrett's 2022 salary into a signing bonus, and that cleared $11.9 million. And with more converting, they converted $9.55 of Vita Vea's 2022 salary into a signing bonus, which cleared $7.64 million. Guard Ali Marpet retired from the league, shockingly, at only 28, I think. Did not see this move coming, and that is a huge blow to the Buccaneers, especially after losing Alex Kappa in free agency, which will be talked about later. He was one of the best guards in the league, and now he's gone. So that's a huge hole on that offensive line that the Bucs have to fill. They lost both guard spots this offseason, so it'll be interesting to see how they fill those. I don't know if they'll necessarily draft someone or if they'll just try to sign a cheap free agent that can fill in. But, I mean, like Tom Brady did unretire, which is the next one I was going to mention. He just makes the team better, so I don't really know how much of a factor that losing both guards is going to be. But yes, Tom Brady did announce that he is unretiring. Really did not like that, but I saw it coming. Not really going to talk about it too much. I don't think he's under contract with the Bucs anymore, but he's going to be back with the Bucs. Really all there is to it. They signed center Ryan Jensen to a 3-year, $39 million extension. Huge. They need to keep that offensive line together, and Brady keeps his center. They signed Carlton Davis to a 3-year, $44.5 million extension with $30 million guaranteed. Another big move for them. Instead of letting him walk, they're trying to keep the band back together for probably one more year. I don't see this team competing or staying competitive for a lot of time, but I guess you never really know how it'll work out. They signed Russell Gage to a 3-year, $30 million deal. Not really a big move, but they got him from the Atlanta Falcons. I think they overpaid, but it is what it is. They traded a 2022 fifth-round pick to the Patriots for guard Shaq Mason. Huge move for the Bucs. That fills in one of their guard spots that I was previously talking about being empty. And the fact that they only had to give up a fifth-round pick for him, I think the Patriots could have gotten a little bit more, but the deal's done. The Bucs now have a top guard at one of their spots. He'll probably fill in at right guard, I think. But like I said, that's just a huge move for the Bucs. They signed wide receiver Chris Godwin to a 3-year, $60 million deal with $40 million guaranteed after initially franchise tagging him. I think it was pretty clear that he was going to re-sign with them. It just was a matter of time. And for how much, I think he could have gotten that much, if not more, from any other team in the league because he is, in my opinion, a top receiver in the league. But he's back in Tampa Bay. They're going to try to keep the band together. They're going to try to keep competing for years to come. And they signed running back Leonard Fournette to a 3-year, $21 million deal to keep him in Tampa Bay. Really all there is to it. I don't think it's a crazy move, but keep one of their star running backs in the facility. Carolina Panthers released A.J. Boye, which cleared up $3.4 million. They released Morgan Fox, which cleared $3 million. They signed Austin Corbett to a 3-year, $26.25 million deal. Really solid guard that can fill in and help protect whoever that quarterback is going to be. Signed Xavier Woods to a 3-year, $15.75 million deal. They signed punter Johnny Hecker to a 3-year, $7.6 million deal with $5 million guaranteed. They got the best punter in the league, in my opinion. Woohoo, go Carolina. They signed Dante Jackson to a 3-year, $35.1 million deal. I don't think it's a terrible move. I think it might be a little bit expensive for what Dante Jackson brings to the field, but they're keeping their group of young corners together to try to develop them and hopefully have not necessarily a Legion of Boom, but have a reliable group of corners that can develop and stay on the team for years to come. They signed Corey Littleton to a 1-year, $2.6 million deal, which was, I won't say huge, but it shores up another linebacker spot. And they signed wide receiver DJ Moore to a 3-year, $61.884 million extension with $41.6 million guaranteed. That's huge. Keep your number one receiver in the building for as long as possible. I think it would be a really big loss for them if they do end up losing him somewhere down the road, but they're trying to kick that can down the road if they ever do lose him. The Saints signed Bradley Roby to a restructured contract extension. I couldn't really find any details on it. They converted $8 million of Marshawn Lattimore's 2022 salary and $15 million of a roster bonus into a signing bonus, which cleared $18.45 million. Alvin Kamara, they converted $6 million of a roster bonus and $4.465 million of a 2022 salary into signing bonus, which cleared up $8.372 million. Marcus Davenport, they converted $8.518 million of his 2022 salary into a signing bonus, which cleared $6.1844 million. They signed safety Marcus May to a 3-year, $22.5 million. I really like this move for them. He's still decently young and can pair well with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He is coming off an Achilles tear, so that's why I think he was a little bit cheaper. And I think that's just an overall good signing for the Saints after they lost Marcus Williams. And they keep converting money. They converted $6.38 million of Demario Davis's salary into a signing bonus, which cleared just over $5.1 million. And then they converted a $9 million roster bonus into a signing bonus for Taysom Hill and added a void year, which cleared $7.2 million. They also re-signed quarterback Jameis Winston to a 2-year, $28 million deal with $21 million guaranteed. After they found out they were no longer in with Deshaun Watson, they instantly re-signed Jameis Winston. Big deal for them. I don't know really what he's going to do after losing Sean Payton, but it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. The Falcons, wide receiver Calvin Ridley was suspended the full 2022 season for gambling. Not really going to get into that. I think it might be a little harsh, but they need to set an example, and Calvin Ridley was just that guy. They signed Jake Matthews to a 3-year, $55 million extension, keeping their franchise left tackle in the building. Not a bad move. They signed Younghoe Koo to a 5-year, $24.25 million deal. Keep your kicker in the building. I think he's one of the better kickers in the league, so no reason not to keep him. They signed cornerback Casey Hayward to a 2-year, $11 million deal. He may not be the best corner in the league or one of the best corners in the league anymore, but he can come in and pair well with A.J. Terrell and can help teach Terrell and can help his development into a top-tier corner. They signed Cordero Patterson to a 2-year, $10.5 million deal, which was huge. He was really one of the only things that offense had going for them last year, so I think it was kind of a priority to keep him. They signed Marcus Mariota to a 2-year deal, but I don't have any of the details on that. And they traded Matt Ryan to the Colts for a 2022 third-round pick. I think that's about as much as they could have gotten for him. With his contract and his age, they send him to a team that is going to compete or try to compete for a Super Bowl this year. And I say good for Matt Ryan. Atlanta wasn't going to do anything this year. They weren't really going to compete just because that roster is awful. So sending him to the Colts was probably one of the best things they could have done. And instead of sending him to a team that's going to suck this year, they send him to a team that's going to compete, that's going to be good. And I think in what's probably going to be one of the last years of his career, Matt Ryan finally has another shot at a Super Bowl. It is kind of sad for the Falcons to see their greatest quarterback go to another team, but he wasn't going to win anything in Atlanta anymore. The NFC West, the Cardinals signed Zach Ertz to a 3-year, $31.65 million contract, along with signing James Conner to a 3-year, $21 million contract. They're not huge moves, but they're keeping two of their most productive offensive players on the roster. And for a team that has whatever's going on with Kyler Murray going on right now, keeping those two in the building is extremely helpful, extremely beneficial to a team that hopes to compete this year. The Rams, they lost left tackle Andrew Whitworth to retirement. One of the best left tackles in the league. It's going to be really hard for them to replace him, in my opinion, but I think they'll be able to do it. They signed Allen Robinson to a 3-year, $46.5 million deal that had just under $31 million guaranteed. Great signing for them. I thought he was one of the better receivers on the open market. And, I mean, the rich just get richer. Of course, the Rams had to sign him, but it'll be interesting to see how he performs with Matthew Stafford, who signed a 4-year, $160 million extension with the Rams with $130 million guaranteed. I mean, he brought them a Super Bowl. He was the quarterback of that Super Bowl winning team, so it only made sense to extend his contract and keep him on the team for the foreseeable future. But with them signing Allen Robinson, that meant they were going to trade Robert Woods, and they traded him to the Titans for a 2023 6th-round pick. Not really a lot I can say about this. He's a good receiver, but he's also coming off of an ACL tear, so I don't know how he's going to produce this year. The Seattle Seahawks, they traded Russell Wilson, but I've already talked about that trade in its own separate video, so I'm not really going to pay any attention to that. They signed Quandre Diggs to a 3-year, $40 million contract. They signed Will Dissly to a 3-year, $24 million deal. They brought back Sidney Jones on a 1-year, $3.6 million deal. They signed Uchenna Nwosu to a 2-year, $20 million contract. Didn't really see that coming, considering I think he's more of a 3-4 edge rusher, and they have more of a 4-3 scheme. But they're the NFL teams. They know what they're doing. I don't. They released Carlos Dunlap, which cleared just over $5 million. And then they brought back running back Rashad Penny on a 1-year, $5.75 million deal as insurance for Chris Carson. The San Francisco 49ers signed Charvarius Ward to a 3-year, $40.5 million contract with $26.7 million guaranteed. I don't know what they're doing. I thought that was extremely overpaid because I don't think his play warrants $13+ million a year. But I mean, if you got money, spend it. Try to improve the holes on your team, and they did just that. They assigned a 1-year, $3.986 million tender on Azeez Al-Shire, one of their linebackers, which I thought was huge. And then they converted contracts for Dee Ford, Eric Armstead, and George Kittle, which cleared just over $25 million, which is massive for them. Clear up as much money as they can, because then, I mean, they're going to clear up more money because it's looking more and more likely that they're going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo. So it will be interesting to see how that all plays out. As always, I'm your host, Parker Striha, and this has been the Striha Sports Podcast. Our random sport fact of the day is that yellow tennis balls were used for the first time in 1986. As always, thank you for tuning in, and don't forget to hit that notification bell for whenever a new video gets posted.